You know, as flexible as a platform that DiGiCo really is, and on other tours I use it to its full extent. Here it's really not quite used to its full extent, but that's just by the fundamental status of rock and roll music. It's guitar, it's bass, it's drums. Here we go. Dennie Miller. I'm the front of house engineer for Volbeat. So yeah, behind me we have yet again a favorite of Volbeat. This is a Meyer Sound Leo family system. There's Leo, LYON, LEOPARD, and 1100 LFC boxes. The system really overall for the rest of the shows on the tour hasn't changed much since 2016. We worked a lot with the same system specifications. However, this time we have Major Tom out as our system provider, so we have the benefit of some of the lovely 1100 LFC array spacers. Today we couldn't fly the subs, so they're all on the ground. But typically our subarrays are a little longer thanks to that, which is, I've seen that as a big improvement from the last tour. Also the ground sub deployment's a little bit different. On the ground we have a front-back cardioid array to try to reduce some of the noise on stage, whereas in the past we did a pretty traditional spaced line across the front of the stage. Today, in fact, there's only an end-fire array on each side of the stage. We weren't able to fly the full sub package and deploy it how we'd prefer to. The typical front-back cardioid array that we would have in front of the stage on each side wouldn't really play nicely with the end-fire setup that we have here today. The Leo system's been a favorite of mine for a long time. LYON's probably my favorite box by far. It's a little more high fidelity. There's some newer technology in that from what was in the Leo boxes. But Leo, there's absolutely nothing like it in my opinion. It reaches out and touches places and venues that other boxes just don't. And it does that with a level of clarity that I think is unparalleled. The transient response of the box is fantastic. That's due to its linear phase characteristics. It's a great product. Being a systems engineer stepping into the role of mixing, mixing other bands in the past, I found it as a big advantage to have an understanding of what a system is capable of and what you might be hearing in a space that it might be influenced by the room or the way the system was deployed. In this case, even more so because I spent the better part of almost 5 years now in the systems engineer seat here for Volbeat. That has been its own set of benefit. Because now not only do you have the experience under your belt of hearing what the show is supposed to sound like, what it's sounded like for years, but you also have that perspective of 5 years as the systems engineer for a band. So you know a little bit about what system deployments work best, what subarrays the band likes, just based on the amount of energy that comes back on the stage. This is a band that really likes that live feel. So doing all directional subarrays all the time, not necessarily the best plan for them because they like to feel some low end on stage. Or just, knowing the difference in from day to day, or maybe having a perspective on the way the array was deployed today, so that if the guitars sound a little heavy in the bottom end, maybe they're a little muddy, instead of reaching for the channel EQ, I might have some inside information that says maybe I should make an adjustment to the PA system instead of the mix. The guys on stage, they really like a little bit of that room noise coming back at them. Michael, the vocalist in particular, he really likes room ambience, and it's come to my attention that he really relies on that to have a good show and for him to be comfortable on stage. So it's not that necessarily we want no low end on stage, because obviously directional arrays that we have at the moment, they're not totally canceling everything behind them, so there's a little something back there, but they do rely on that noise, the necessarily being indoors where a lot of people, they're like, there's a slap back and this is weird. This band is really into that. Even though there's a clean stage up there, there's still wedges, there's still live guitar cabinets, there's a lot of ambient mics in their in-ear mixes, and that's key. The band no longer have side fills on stage. I think that's been a great improvement for everybody. Trying to control the arrival times on stage, I think, has clarified a lot of the in-ear mixes, and I think that's improved their overall happiness on stage. That's my opinion. It's definitely improved things for the people down in the front rows. He's got MJF 210 wedges all under the stage. They're in a grate, so they're firing up through there. LEOPARD across the front of the stage, sometimes stacked on top of the subwoofers as a little bit of front fills. That's kind of it for extracurricular components in this system. It's pretty much what's in the air is what you see. Typically on a good day you would see all of the main hang, which is 18 Leo over a downfill of 4 LYON, and then on the side it's 14 Leo over 4 LYON. So pretty big hangs of PA. One of the things that I think Meyer does best is integration with older products, with newer products. Their Galaxy processors, as well as Callisto and the original Galileo, have a thing called delay integration. They also allow the use of all-pass filters. And you can go in and you can actually tell it, it's like I'm using this box with this box, and it'll match the phase curve, the slope of the phase response of the box so that they play nice together. Leo is a powerhouse. It's what it is. I think LYON has a fidelity to it that none of the other boxes have. And then LEOPARD being native mode, you don't really have to do a lot of work to tune that box. It pretty well comes out correct. You might find that you have to shade a little bit of high end just for taste, but it's pretty out of the gate correct. And then all of the elements, they play really well together. You don't run into a situation where you walk the transition between two boxes and you go, wow, that was really nasty. You don't find that here. Behind me, these Nearfield studio monitors I have, these are relatively new from Meyer Sound. These are the Meyer Sound Amie. I don't have an Amie sub with me, but I happen to have one at home, and I have to say these have become one of my favorite tools in studio and live, even when not using a Meyer Sound system, because they do have such a flat frequency response. It's a blank canvas to paint on. I find that sometimes I might insert on the matrix output for these, depending on the gig, depending on the PA system, I might insert an EQ curve so that they more closely resemble my target for the day. But again, they're so transparent and so clean that they're a really great reference. And when you pair it with an Amie sub, which is shockingly powerful, it's a nice full sound for you right at front of house in such a small compact package. Well, for me, in the past, I've got a resume that's full of pop artists. So these are tours with lots of playback inputs, lots of things happening, different guitar sounds for every song that are wildly varying, synths, keyboards, you name it, guide tracks for vocals, and for better or worse, I kind of became familiar with that, or comfortable with it, you might say. And this is its own animal. I've done a lot of work in metal and rock and roll as a systems engineer, but this is one of the first times that I've been mixing a real rock band. So there's a certain set of challenges that are centered around making the guitars big and full, but not too bright or not too muddy. It's a really interesting balancing act. And again, I was very fortunate to get to listen to this show for years and years and years, because I know what it's supposed to sound like, and that's a huge benefit. I feel like if somebody would have tried to come in and mix the show without having that background, that could have been a little hairy for a minute. Volbeat's a unique thing. It's big and in your face, and the fans have a really high expectations because the previous engineer had 13 years to perfect this. And that's really saying something. So trying to recreate that has been a challenge all its own, and just balancing that frequency spectrum between, say, I don't know, 125 and 800 hertz. There's a lot of content in this show that happens right there, and trying to keep that really well balanced when you get really defined guitar sounds. You want to be able to hear what Rob played or what Michael played or what parts they're playing, and the audience should be able to tell those apart very easily. It shouldn't be this kind of soup of guitar. It should be really clean and defined and full. Volbeat Tour 2019, powered by SD7. I've been a longtime fan of DiGiCo consoles. This tour has been a tour that used DiGiCo consoles well before me. It's a super flexible platform, and it allows me to continue doing some of the things that I was able to learn from the previous engineer that was here over the 5 years that I worked alongside him. So moving on from DiGiCo, I've got a QLab running on a machine that fires some intros like the show start and the outro track that we play. There's still a lot of waves in the show. I've been doing my best to try to balance some of that out and trying to use more of the console processing, but there are some things that Waves does that just nothing else can. Everything is fully redundant in the Waves environment. There's truly 2 sets of Waves hosts, 2 sets of servers with 1 redundant server running on the A engine, and even the, it's not quite fully redundant in the sense of the QLab playback, but there is an orange box over here so that we're not using the MADI ports in the console, so that if it were to fail over, you would still have playback at the end of the night. You wouldn't have to be running around to try to get ready for the outro track if something failed over. Using the Mac Pro for tracks live, Pro Tools is typically a favorite of mine, but the hot swap drive bays really kind of make life easy there when you're juggling files that are as large as 250 or 300 gigabytes. Below that, there's a Sonnet rack mount Mac Mini, and inside there, those are the two Waves host computers. Below that, there's a little KVM switch there, and the Windows machine that's over here running Compass 10 Easy and Smart V8. I'm using the same MGB that does all the QLab playback here for I/O. 10 Easy has become a favorite tool of mine. You see it, I've got it running here on the center screen on the console, the little external input. That's really become kind of a crutch for me. I can't say enough good things about it. It has some cool integration with Smart that I'm not using on this tour because of 96K doesn't play nice quite yet. And then also inside Smart, you know, they've been making some really cool headway into their SPL measurement integration in the software there. I've got a set of Shure PSM1000s down here. Myself and the lighting designer have been spoiled enough that we get to have wireless in-ear packs out here. I do use in-ear molds instead of headphones to monitor throughout the show, solo inputs, listen to things. And Niller, our LD, he's become really fond of a nice direct in-ear mix instead of listening to the PA. And you know, also, at least I think he agrees with this. I know I've seen an improvement in the show from doing this because it does away with a little bit of latency between the PA and front of house. For us on any given day, that could be anywhere between 80 to 120 milliseconds. And that's kind of a noticeable jump in timing for him. He's really on top of the cues now because he can hear that. Below that is a Meyer Galileo Galaxy processor. Again, this has become a favorite of mine. I think Meyer makes a really fantastic processor here. Even when I use other sound systems, I've come to request this in my rack to assist in the tuning process, or even sometimes just to use on master bus EQ, because their U-shaping EQ is a really flexible and fantastic tool. You know, one of the things that I thought would be huge in this is a Vitamin plugin from Waves, and I wondered for so very long why, again, our previous engineer here on Volbeat was so fond of the MaxBass plugin. And let me tell you, there's nothing else that quite does that. And it was one of those things where in rehearsals, just sitting in my own private room with the Nearfields, where, you know, of course you want to try other things and go, well, you know, I saw this technique for so long, but I wonder if there's something better. And I tried every plugin known to man to try to balance out the amount of low-mid energy that was in the guitars, and nothing quite did it like that. So yet again, that's an example of somebody had a really long time to figure out the best way to do this, and I was fortunate enough to get to learn from some of those methods. So MaxBass from Waves has been a really big thing. And then also cross compression at times. So, you know, using that to necessarily balance out the lead guitar sounds from the rhythm guitar sounds, so that when one of the guitar players, when he takes a lead, that it just tucks the other one a little bit. Because there's a certain level of preciseness that a technique like cross compression, you know, keying a compressor from another source, the level of precision that provides in that level change in that moment when somebody clicks that pedal, you can't do that as a human. You can't be that quick. You can't stay on top of things. There's too many changes to make it once. So that's one of the places where, you know, macro controls and cross compression really come into a big help. And that's another key thing that I think makes Volbeat sound like Volbeat. Volbeat's a real rock and roll band. There's not a lot of playback going on in the show, hardly any at all at this moment. And with that, you know, the music, the new record's a little different. So I've had to expand to using a few more snapshot controls than the previous engineer had. You know, previously there was only delay times in the snapshots. There was a snapshot for every song, but only did delay times for vocal delays. Whereas now some of the new music, the guitar sounds are a little different. There's a song called Sorry Sack of Bones that has a real kind of surf rock guitar tone in it. And the processing settings for the rhythm guitar, for what we've known as Volbeat for so long, don't really suit that. So use some snapshot recall there to recall some EQ changes, just to suit that a little better. There's also some video cues in the show now, and I'm using snapshot automation so that I can recall things like level EQ and mute status for the video playback. Miller fires that from his console through an M-box rig back by the stage. You know, just a layer of safety so that I don't forget anything on accident. But outside of that, there's not really a lot of automation going on in the console. And there's not a terribly complex layout either. You know, Volbeat really kind of fits within 56 channels, at least main inputs from the band. There are some extracurricular things, talkbacks, effects returns. I've got some other inputs in here like the QLab stuff, video. Once you factor all those kind of extracurricular administrative inputs, I think the input count goes up to about 102 in the console. And so many of those things you don't have to touch during the show. DiGiCo, it's always been a flexibility thing. Well, there's been some tours where maybe I would pick a different tool for that job because it suits itself. It's so, you think of that band and you go, oh, well, this is the console you just have to use. Either be that for its sound or maybe some technical characteristic that it has that some other console doesn't. DiGiCo is the console that I want when I don't know what I'm walking into. All the time, every time. Because it's so flexible. I have all the options. I can rearrange the faders however I want. I can build some really complex macros using the GPIO. You can trigger macros from faders. There's so much flexibility in this console that it's the console I want on hand if there's ever a moment where I don't know what I'm walking into and I'm going to have to roll with the punches. Germany tends to be one of my favorites, actually. Not just because for this band it's a huge market. The fans here are really into the music. That obviously plays a part into it. I think every mixing engineer that's kind of worth their salt does it for the music, right? That's definitely a component. The fans here are really into this music. But also you'll find that there are venues here that are a little more structurally capable. Meyer's system, as well as many others, when you start hanging big hangs of it, weight becomes a consideration. I find that there are a lot of venues here in Germany that will support that weight, whereas sometimes outside of Germany you start to run into some issues with load over a specific area, because once you start hanging 2 hangs plus there's 2 hangs of main PA, main outfill, maybe even a small 270 hang, and then 2 hangs of subwoofers, you've really concentrated a lot of load in one area. And I find that the buildings here can support that with just some spreader trusses, whereas in other places we start running into issues where it's pretty common that we can't hang the full PA, whereas I think this is the only venue in all of Germany that we're playing where we have to compromise and put a lot of the subs on the ground and cut the main hangs in half. So yeah, but Germany's been a favorite, and also the people here. I like working with people here. Can't explain that one. It's a good vibe.